be introducing myself shortly, but this is the Urban Climate Alliance presenting municipal climate action in Ontario. If you have attended any of our presentations in the past, you'll know that this one is being recorded and it will be shared and shareable after the fact. Everyone who's registered will get that link, and then we'll also be sharing that on our various social media feeds and the like there too. So just to start things off, the Urban Climate Alliance is an alliance of 4 different groups from around Southern Ontario. It includes Environment Hamilton, Ecology Ottawa, the Toronto Environmental Alliance, and Citizen Environmental Alliance. I'll allow everyone to introduce their own respective groups, but just to start things off, as I said, my name is Ian Borsick. I'm the Executive Director of Environment Hamilton. Environment Hamilton was founded in 2001, and since then we have been the city's leading environmental voice on local municipal climate action and environmental action. And we have been really outspoken on issues to do with the climate emergency within the city of Hamilton, issues to do with land use and preserving our farmland, which we still do have here in the city of Hamilton, as well as improving our local air and other and local waterways. We're super happy to be part of the Urban Climate Alliance, and I believe we've been around since the very beginning. And I'm just going to hand it over to one of my colleagues. Next is Dan. Dan just struggling getting unmuted there.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Yeah, thank you so much, Ian. Hi everyone. My name is Dan Mutavingo, and I am the climate campaigner at Ecology Ottawa. Ecology Ottawa was founded in 2006, and it is a not-for-profit, volunteer-driven organization working towards making Ottawa the green capital of Canada. We have been a member of the UCA since the beginning, and I am really happy to see such a large number of people today ready for what should be a great conversation on municipal climate action. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Dan. Next up, I'll hand it over to Hao Sen.
Thanks, Ian. My name is Hao Sen. I am the climate campaigner at the Toronto Environmental Alliance. Toronto Environmental Alliance has been around for 35 years. And we've campaigned locally to find solutions to Toronto's urban environmental problems. And our mission is to promote a greener Toronto. We work with concerned individuals, with community groups, and with professionals and workers to encourage the participation of local people and local communities on local issues. And our vision is a green and healthy and equitable city with economic activity that sustains our environment. T has over 60,000 supporters across Toronto. And yeah, we're very, very happy to be here. We've been part of T. I also think there's potentially since the beginning. I don't quite know. I wasn't around when that happened. But yeah, this has been a great working relationships in the Urban Climate Alliance for us over the past many years.
Thank you, Hassan. I'm going to hand it over to Derek next.
Thanks, Ian. I'm Derek Coronado. I'm the Executive Director of the Citizens Environment Alliance of Southwestern Ontario. We were established in 1985 and we're based in Windsor. Our mission is to advocate to protect, restore, and enhance the quality of the local environment in this part of the Great Lakes Basin. And we're one of the founders of the Urban Climate Alliance as well. And we're very happy to continue with the Urban Climate Alliance. Thanks.
Thanks, Derek. And so to begin things off, we at the Urban Climate Alliance, as we alluded to, have been working together through various different means and on different projects over the years, but really as leading environmental organizations in our respective cities, but also province-wide. We have, over the last year, through support from the Echo Foundation, really honed in on shared experiences and shared struggles that everyone has within the province of Ontario. And we strongly suspect that some of the things that we talk about during this meeting may not be super relevant to other communities, but we think most of it will be relevant to most other communities. And the time that we're in within the province of Ontario is a unique one. Years of downloading governmental responsibilities onto municipalities without increasing the revenue nor providing any additional revenue tools has left cities with an impossible budget balancing act every single year. The climate crisis is impacting municipalities directly, and our local non-governmental organizations are commonly stretched thin, relying on short-term grants, for projects that do not necessarily lead to sustained policy and education and advocacy within our respective communities. We are now entering the 6th year, yes, the 6th year of this current provincial government. And they have further burdened cities with the downloading of responsibilities, impeding local decision making, and removing our already limited necessary revenue tools from us, such as through Bill 23. Meanwhile, while that's been happening, the provincial government, despite some unsuccessful efforts, some of them very well known, I'm sure, by everyone on this call, they have moved forward with other environmentally destructive projects such as Highway 413. They've weakened already our inadequate environmental protection laws, and there are other efforts that the province has either already undertaken or are currently undertaking still. Despite that, though, we are also operating during an unprecedented time when it comes to interest and support for climate action. Many municipalities, including the 4 of us on the call, have recognized the climate emergency that is unfolding. And we have also seen the need to create a new business as usual with municipalities responding to the climate emergency. As our different municipalities achieve different success in different sectors, it's absolutely vital that we continue to build relationships and learn from one another, and then be able to use those lessons learned and be able to achieve successes in our own respective communities. And on just a personal note, I'll just say something that's been really interesting working with my colleagues at other municipalities is that despite how much is common between us, every once in a while, one of organizations is able to have a breakthrough, a councillor passes a motion, and then there's so much to be learned from how that success unfolds. And without that ongoing dialogue with each other, we really would be in the dark and just be kind of looking at it saying, well, that would be great if we could do it here, but how? And so with all that said, we have honed in on a few key areas of interest that we think are of key interest to municipalities across the province. As I said earlier, this is by no means every single thing that municipalities are dealing with when it comes to the climate crisis. I'm sure there will be a variety of topics that you won't see on this that you really wish would. But over the last year of our collaborative work, we've really honed in on these areas as a common struggle that we've had within our cities, and also a common place for some serious success to unfold. So, starting off, fossil gas. Some folks on this call, and I believe we hosted a webinar last year about fossil gas and specifically how to get municipalities off fossil gas. If you're interested in learning more about that, definitely watch the recording of that webinar. It is available. However, it is important to note that within a municipality like Toronto, being our largest municipality, 54% of Toronto's community emissions come from fossil gas use. Toronto is also proposing to follow cities like New York, Montreal, and Vancouver, implementing emissions performance standards, which is essentially for folks who maybe aren't familiar with that, it's like a development standard, but for buildings that already exist. And that will be implemented, as you could see on the screen, hopefully within in 2024, which is this year, and then by next year in 2025. Building retrofits, which, put a pin on that, will also be necessary to achieve greenhouse gas emission reductions. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what we need to be doing is not moving in the direction that we have been as a province, which is continuing to provide fossil gas to new buildings, continuing to make hookups mandatory, but rather we should be moving away from providing those hookups, and we should be moving away from the use of fossil gas, not just trying to eliminate or reduce the use of it, but eliminate it entirely. Moving on, as I alluded to, building retrofits are a major concern and a major opportunity for action within the province of Ontario, within all municipalities. If you could think about the built form that all municipalities in Ontario have, we're all extremely similar in that we all have very old buildings that are not up to code. They are not performing very well when it comes to either retaining the heating and cooling that they have currently, or just being efficient when it comes to electricity use. There are some great opportunities coming forward. Toronto has been really leading the charge on this with regards to their Help High-Rise and Retrofit Loan Program. However, Hamilton, and I am very proud of this, after 7 years, finally started to move on getting a home energy retrofit program here in the city of Hamilton going. The reason why I say after 7 years was because in 2017, Environment Hamilton led a local effort to get a motion passed by our local council to direct staff to start performing a feasibility study on such a program. And then there was no action on that by city staff for a number of years for a variety of reasons. Originally, one of the arguments was that we already have the cap and trade system in place in the province of Ontario, and that was generating quite a few funds that were going to grants for homeowners. And so the general argument was, well, why would the city provide low interest loans when they can get a grant from the province? Of course, those grants aren't available anymore, as we know from our cap and trade being abolished within the province of Ontario. So there was still a need for that, and we were able to get some motion going there. And now this year in the city of Hamilton, a small number of homes will be part of a pilot project in terms of retrofitting their homes, which will be replacing a fossil gas furnace with an electric heat pump. Derek, I'm going to hand it over to you as well, because I know Windsor is also having a similar struggle to what we had with regards to your home energy programs.
Thanks, Ian. 2017 was the year when the de facto climate action plan in Windsor was passed, known as the Community Energy Plan. The major emissions reduction component of that was to be a retrofit program. The acronym is DEAR, Deep Energy Efficiency Retrofit. The implementation plan was for it to happen in 2019. The current target date for implementation of the DEAR is 2025, I believe the fourth quarter of 2025. It has been delayed several times, not counting COVID. The reasons being simply that the city has not been ready and does not have the funding in place, does not have the personnel in place. And in the interim, business plans have been prepared. So some work is happening on it, although we're still a long way from the overall implementation of the plan. And of course, in the interim, a climate emergency was declared in the city of Windsor. So one wonders, in terms of an emergency situation, how fast the municipality is actually moving.
Yeah, and that's been a similar problem we've seen here in the city of Hamilton, which is just how difficult addressing pre-existing buildings is. As we alluded to in the previous section, Toronto certainly has been really leading the charge, and in a lot of ways, we at the UCA have sometimes joked about how Toronto is the center of the universe, or at the very least, center of Ontario. But I think it's been a very common experience in our municipalities and across Ontario with addressing the use of our existing building stock, and what to do about it is a real problem that we're having in this province. Howson, did you have something you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, and I just also wanted to add that, like, yes, Toronto does have the programs, but the reality is that for building retrofits, no municipality, even one as big as Toronto, has enough funds to actually operationalize the numbers of retrofits that we actually need in those buildings. And so it's a huge challenge. And so despite the fact that we have these containers, these like programmatic containers where people can come in and ask for, a grant here, a loan there, or something like that, there just isn't the money that can be generated inside the city of Toronto itself. So it requires significant amounts of help from the upper levels of government that have far more revenue making powers in terms of the pure number of revenue that those levels of government can make. And so, yeah, I don't want people to get the impression that Toronto is like doing great, because it's like, yeah, we do have some good programs. We want to move forward. We do have a good plan, but there are still significant barriers to actually getting the amount of change that we need.
And on that note, as a final piece, it is worth noting that if you are applying for programs that exist at higher levels of government, right now, provincially, there's not much. But at the same time, if you apply for federal grants, a lot of those grants are only applicable if you're an Enbridge customer. And so it's also important to note that while we're talking about getting us off fossil gas, at the same time, what is happening with regards to retrofits at higher levels of government, aren't quite there yet when it comes to recognizing where we need to be going. Moving on is transportation. This has been a major topic of discussion among all of us amongst the UCA for a number of years now. In the city of Hamilton, and I'll just speak to my own current lived experience, prior to the pandemic, transportation was the only source of emissions that were regularly going up in the city of Hamilton with our biannual greenhouse gas emission inventory. We were able to see a somewhat bit of a plateau with regards to building emissions, but regularly transportation emissions were going up year over year with regards to pre-pandemic. Through the pandemic, of course, that was definitely complicated. However, there's other good news and there's other problems elsewhere. Toronto's currently on track of installing 100 kilometers of bike lanes. And Ottawa is certainly having some struggles as well, but this is a problem that is widely experienced across the province of Ontario. Municipalities really struggled through the pandemic when it came to addressing the shortfalls in funding for transportation that were still moving in terms of public transit, still moving essential workers throughout the entire pandemic. Yet, we have not seen the higher levels of government from both the province and federal governments stepping in and funding these vital services. With that said, I just wanted to hand it over to Dan to speak a little bit about the Ottawa experience, and then we'll go back to Howsen for an interesting campaign that you have underway there still currently. So Dan, if you want to take it away and talk about the Ottawa experience.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. This has really been an issue for all of us for the past year. I'll talk about public transportation and active transportation. So transportation is responsible for 42% of Ottawa's greenhouse gas emissions. So public transit is a critical part of meeting our climate and emissions goals and offers mobility to a wide variety of people here in Ottawa. But last year's budget saw cuts of around 47 million, yet we already had a deficit of 39 million that was left unfilled for in the public transit budget. There has been low ridership since the COVID period, and this is mainly because the transit system is unreliable and inaccessible in most places. Last year, the government decided to also increase fares and cut transit routes to reduce the costs and increase ridership. As you can imagine, our transit system will then decline, which also means forced car dependency for some and cancelled activities for others. And this is the same thing that government has been trying to avoid. So we believe public transit is an essential service that has to be funded, accessible, and is incentivized for riders, and routes need to be expanded and reliable. In the same breath, last year in April, the council approved part 1 of the update to the city's transportation master plan, endorsing policies that will guide decision-making in Ottawa's transportation system over the next 2 decades. And some of these new policies address growth and intensification, climate change, and road safety, among others. The approved report also includes the active transportation project list, so such as walking, rolling, and biking, which is a very critical part in meeting our climate emission goals, and also offers mobility to a variety of people. This also is critical in achieving 15-minute neighborhoods, which is also a campaign we just launched yesterday in partnership with Walkable Ottawa here in Ottawa. So among transportation modes, active transportation produces the lowest emissions, has the highest return on investment for municipalities, and costs the least to users, and this is why Ecology Ottawa and Ottawans in general would appreciate an accelerated implementation of active transportation infrastructure in the transportation master plan. Something as crucial as a bike share system is really unheard of in Ottawa, yet cities like Montreal have been showing us how you can thrive with such systems in place. So I think it is time for the city of Ottawa to work with local businesses and create incentives for them to adopt these systems. We are really looking to an extended period of warm weather this year, so that will come in handy. But I would say in good news, recently the city announced that it's reviewing its idling control bylaw, which was implemented in September 2007. And this bylaw seeks to limit unnecessary vehicle idling to combat air pollution, reduce carbon emissions, and contribute to a cleaner and healthier environment. So it is really great that the city is consulting the public on this opportunity to improve it, so we can reduce our emissions and improve air quality in our communities. Yeah, so I think I'll pass it to Hausen.
Thanks, Darren.
Yeah, and I think the fact that transit funding isn't enough for municipalities to run their transit systems is a serious issue. So prior to the pandemic, Toronto's transit system, up to 70% of the transit budget was funded by the fare box, which seemed all fine and dandy until the pandemic hit. And then that caused a $1.3 billion budget hole in the transit system, which cascaded into the entire city's budget. So the city's budget was seriously impacted by the very fact, and I would argue primarily by the fact that our transit system was far too reliant on individual transit fares. But we also need to make sure that that transit system is there because it is the backbone of the transportation system here in Toronto, right? Without it, you would have about 1 million more cars on the road very easily. And so, and of course, a lot of people wouldn't be able to get around because not only would congestion be higher, but a lot of people wouldn't be able to afford being able to afford that car, which I believe Rate Hub recently said costs something like $1,300 a month to run for the average Canadian. And so it's a serious problem. So that's why what the Toronto Environmental Alliance has been doing over the past year with TTC riders is to advocate very strongly for what is known as a commercial parking levy. What that is a very small levy on non-residential commercial parking lots, and that levy is actually charged to the commercial parking lot landlord. So that's actually going through the city committee process right now. There's actually a meeting on it on Thursday, and so I've been very busy trying to get people out there. But we have found out through the city reports that the commercial parking levy, a fee of just 1 to 2 cents an hour per parking spot, could bring in as much as $150 million in revenue a year. That is the equivalent of a 3.5% increase in the residential property tax. It is an enormous amount of money for the city of Toronto. And it works because the staff report estimates that there might be up to 30 square kilometers of parking in the city of Toronto, 85% of which is currently free. To give you an idea of how much 30 square kilometers is, downtown Toronto, if you've been to downtown Toronto, you go to the Don River, to Bathurst, Bloor, to the lake, that's about 15 square kilometers. So that's how much pure space there is in parking that we think there is. And so we're trying to get this forward through the city committee process and through city council this week. Hopefully they'll be able to start counting all the parking spaces this year and then start implementing some version of this parking fee for 2025. And we believe that it could really transform how transit is funded in the city, and at the same time do some pretty amazing things like, right-sized parking lots so that there's more housing developments and unused parking spots. We can use it to basically level the playing ground for small businesses that don't have free parking spots and rely very heavily on transit to make sure that their employees and their customers get there. And even, even businesses that do have free parking spots, many of their employees rely on transit to get to work on time as well. And so it's absolutely vital that we get this past the city of Toronto. So if you're in Toronto, please feel free to connect with me. I'll leave my email address in the messages chat here. And yeah, we need to get this through executive council on Thursday, and then through through the general city council 3 weeks from now as well.
Thank you, Hassan. And that effort is so exciting because, sitting here in Hamilton, where we were recently making national news because our council on a split vote said no to sacrificing 27 parking spots for an affordable housing development. Seeing other municipalities really succeed in addressing parking the way it should be, I think will really help, at least empower local activists and groups like us here in the city of Hamilton and other groups elsewhere in their own municipalities, and be able to really show, look, when we start factoring in how much these spots are costing us as a city, and in the city of Hamilton, we have a lot of parking lots. And just how little they're actually paying. We're only just moving forward now with a stormwater fee system that's going to be impacting those lots. But in reality, parking is king in the city of Hamilton still is here as well. And then
Yeah.
just moving on. Oh yeah, sorry,
Oh,
Hassan.
sorry, it's really interesting because parking is such a nobody's really thought about parking for years, and more people are realizing how much space it is. Like we expect that, we think that in Canada there's up to 4 parking spaces for every car on the road, and that's something like 1,300 square feet, which means that that's the equivalent of like 2 one-bedroom apartments. So that gives you an idea of to how much parking that we have, how much space we give per car. And so, asking for a little bit from that to change a little bit that into housing, putting in systems to make that kind of stuff easier, putting in systems to get that to pay for transit so that it makes it easy for people to switch if they choose to switch, would be great. And in the meantime, it'll, cut congestion and do all these great things for the environment.
And I think that's a really great segue for our next topic, which is urban tree canopy. Because when we think about in our own respective cities, and for anyone who's on the call who's not from one of our 4 cities, just think about in your town or in your city how much space is actually allocated to parking, into pavement, and then think how much space is actually dedicated for trees. It's quite shocking. So on the screen here, I actually have the total tree canopy within the urban area for our respective cities. As you can see here, Ottawa and Toronto are doing better than Windsor and Hamilton. But when you think about what 31% really means, it's not a lot. In the city of Hamilton, we currently have 21% tree canopy coverage. That is also, and we know this through various different projects we've done on the ground here in Hamilton, that is not 21% spread out across the entire city. It is 21% for the entire city, yes, but we have areas of the city that have vastly less than 21% coverage of tree canopy space. And the reality is that those neighborhoods that have that virtually non-existent tree canopy are also some of the neighborhoods that are being hardest hit by climate emergency issues. They're being hard hit by extreme heat, but also they trend in terms of demographics of being newcomers, of being poor, of being people who don't necessarily have the means to move elsewhere within the municipality or anywhere else, and they're dealing with this here. There's a lot of opportunities that are underway within our different municipalities. There are, here in Hamilton, we have the street tree program where the city of Hamilton will actually plant a tree on your road allowance for free, and all you have to do is just kind of make sure it doesn't die through watering it. You can also get various different free trees through different programs for your backyard and the like there too. But ultimately, what we've really recognized talking as the Urban Climate Alliance over the last year is that this is something our municipalities are still really struggling with. Hamilton has been at the 21% target right now for a very long time, and our stretch goal is not that much better than what Toronto has already achieved. When we factor in these issues of how much more extreme heat will be impacting us, how much, just the impacts of trees on local health and the improvement that they create for air quality, it's absolutely vital as a environmental justice piece that we accomplish this. But from a climate justice piece, it's absolutely vital that we get going on planting these trees, because you don't plant a tree and then have its immediate benefits right away. You, in some cases, have to wait decades for those trees to grow. So any amount of effort that's undertaken by by municipalities is really important. But what we've really seen is all of our municipalities almost just hit a ceiling when it comes to this. And then as well, there are, of course, setbacks when it comes to things like invasive species with the emerald ash borer. There was the ice storm a few years ago that impacted virtually all of our municipalities, and we lost quite a bit of trees in all of our different communities through that. So it's absolutely vital that we stay on top of this, and this has been something that we've really noticed that municipalities have really stagnated on recently. And it's also certainly top of mind as well with the wildfire smoke that we've seen from our large forested areas that aren't municipally owned and stewarded. So with that said, we're going to move on to a question and answer period. This webinar is not supposed to go much longer than an hour, if at all. And I just need to be able to look at the chat, which I can do. All four of us are happy to answer any questions that any attendees may have. We also have a few other ideas of things that we would be interested in hearing what attendees are experiencing within their own communities. But ultimately, I think one thing to kind of get us going before the Q&A gets opened up. And again, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. And I can unmute you. You can also use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen in the Zoom. I think I'm pointing at it for most of you, I hope. And you can type in a question there. But I think ultimately, just to start things off while folks are maybe typing questions and the like there too, I would like to ask if anyone is on the call, if there's anything that is speaking out to you as particularly concerning within your own communities. And I think as well, what I'll also ask is just for Dan, Hassan, and Derek, the four of us in our different groups have been working together for quite a while now. Since 2013 is when we all officially started. There's been a lot of progress since 2013 with regards to seeing the climate emergency really get taken seriously, get named by our various different municipalities. Shout outs to Kingston being the first Ontario municipality to do that officially. But I think really what I'm curious to hearing from the three of you is, where do you see like the real struggle right now in our various municipalities? Is it councillors, maybe not having a full understanding of climate change? Is it staff? Is it the, staff and council are really moving forward, but you notice that the public just isn't as engaged? Or is it something entirely else? Where do you see in your own municipalities, the key barrier to climate action being? And I'll let you guys volunteer to answer that one in turn. I see some thinking caps on.
Well, for Windsor, it's definitely council is the barrier currently. Since the election of 2022, we've seen a shift away from focusing on the environment and more focus on economic issues. And of course, that idea that the environment is competing against the economy is crept back into the thinking of the current council. And the climate emergency, of course, was declared amongst all our cities. In Windsor, it was 2019. That really hasn't moved council to do much, let alone speed up action or spend more money on any action.
Dan and Housen, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think it's just something short to say. I believe it comes with, again, City Council being more engaged with the communities. There's this engagement of coming and taking pictures. I've been here, I've been in these volunteer opportunities, I've attended these, they're hosting this and that, I've attended, I was there. But meaningful engagement and actually being intentional about engagement and actually consulting people on their opinions and making sure that you act on those consultations that you do is where this disconnect is. City Council, of course, will come to the communities, pretend they're hearing, and then they go and do something very completely different. I don't know why that is, but completely different once they leave the place. So I would say intentional, meaningful engagement with the community leaders and also communities in general is what's really what the disconnect is.
Thanks, Dan. And then Hassan, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I struggle with this a lot, but I do think there's something to be said about how difficult it is to get anything done, even when your council is a relatively supportive one, without continued public and engaged pressure. So we've been relatively lucky, I think, recently at the council level in terms of electing people that are relatively environmentally and just progressive and understanding, where we need to go. But even with that, the amount of pressure that councillors feel from other councillors and from other members of the public and from interest groups that really don't want environmental progress much at all is significant. And in order to provide them with political cover and to build more influence and stuff, there's a consistent need of regular public pressure. And I think that's probably the hardest thing to do, is to just keep that up and maintain it. So like going back to one of the things I think Dan was saying no, I think it was Derek who said that like there was a thing that passed and then like nothing moved forward for like eight years. No, it was Ian, I think, like 8 years. And that is an extremely common thing to occur, where people feel as if just getting something passed at city council will mean that it's going to get implemented as it was passed. And that's increasingly, I'm realizing as I get more and more into this job, because I've been for about a year and a bit now, not the case. You actually need a group of dedicated people to regularly check on them and push and push and push until it gets done and then it sticks. And so that, I think, is a challenge for any kind of organization, any kind of municipality, regardless as to where we are in the political cycle or who's in power and who's not.
Yeah, thank you, Hassan, and thank you, Dan and Derek. We have some good questions coming in now. First one's from Raul. Have there been any initiatives in reducing street parking to promote more sustainable modes of transportation? They live in Ottawa, but they feel it's very significant, and they're curious about initiatives across the province. I can jump in first. Here in Hamilton, we have lost some street parking to things like bike lanes and in some cases some priority lanes for buses. Interestingly enough, street parking still, and I hate to say it, still has like a place in the city of Hamilton when it comes to street calming. So for anyone who's never been to Hamilton, we have a 6-lane highway that runs through the center of our downtown, like literally in front of our city hall. And that was the signal of progress back in the 1970s. But now, of course, with dozens of crashes, quite literally dozens of deaths, the city is now looking at two-waying it and making it much safer. And so on-street parking for that stretch of road does serve a purpose. However, I have certainly noticed here in the city of Hamilton, the city is certainly very reticent to say that they're removing on-street parking for any reason. Especially, and I noticed that there's a lot of opposition when it comes to things like bike lanes replacing on-street parking. It is still something that I think we have some city councilors who are really willing to kind of go to bat for cycling, but I would say that's the exception, not the rule, still here in the city of Hamilton. And in fact, I would say that there is not a concerted effort to convert street parking into anything else. But for the others, do you guys know of anything or want to weigh in on your experiences with removal of on-street parking?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about the Toronto situation. Is that one of the reasons why our bike lane network is growing and continues to grow at the pace it is, and that's it's not fantastic, but it's not bad, is because we have an organization called Cycle TO, which used to be known as the Toronto Cyclist Union, and they do neighborhood fights, neighborhood by neighborhood, street by street, sometimes block by block, pushing for changes and bike lanes and stuff like that. And so it's a grueling daily work, but it's an incredible group of passionate people, and I think that having that has really helped ensure that that we get a more integrated bike network. And they also do things like watch for changes at City Hall and watch for changes of the city staff and talk to city staff to make sure things get done properly and give ideas and all that type of stuff. And even with all that work, there still is pushback. And they organize against that pushback as much as they can. And so, yeah, kind of like going back with like the theme that I had before of like, this is work. It takes a dedicated group of people passionate about making their city better to actually, strategically organize, move forward, and get things done. And even then, you have to stick around to make sure it doesn't go away and that people don't rip them out. Because, for example, just yesterday there was unfortunately a cyclist death out in Scarborough, right on a road, right at a place where there used to be a bike lane that was ripped out in 2011. And it's heartbreaking that to see that actually happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Hassan. And I know as well, Cycle Toronto, the work that they were doing with regards to communicating to business owners and really educating them. Hey, actually, you think that you're getting a lot more business through drivers than you actually are. And that effort was really interesting and really illuminating, I think, for some businesses here in Hamilton who are a little bit more open to those discussions. So we have a couple more questions. This one's from Michael. Toronto schools have a particular problem with building emissions, the highest per square meter in the province. We have a project to work on that, and they're wondering whether any other groups in other municipalities are working on school emissions. I can simply answer for Hamilton. It is a topic of conversation. However, we in the city of Hamilton are still struggling from, we have some schools that are sitting completely unused, and we're in discussions with the school board about what to do with that surplus land. And quite frankly, it hasn't been coming up as much because a lot of these old schools that are now being shut down just frankly need to be completely replaced. But there isn't necessarily a concerted effort here in the city of Hamilton with regards to this. But I'm curious about other municipalities, Dan and Derek and Hassan, if you know of anything. I guess not. Okay, interesting. Could be.
It sounds to me like Michael knows more about the schools in Toronto than I do. So I'd love to hear about Michael's experience.
Well, it also sounds like there's an opportunity for some provincial-wide advocacy on this, because I mean, all the school boards are creatures of the province in so many different ways. Based off of what I understand, nearly every municipality has the same kind of love-hate relationship with their own school boards. Moving on from Stefan. Oh, sorry, Hassan.
No, it's like we have been talking about the utilization of school boards as climate emergency hubs in neighborhoods and stuff. So we're still working that out as part of our kind of climate response campaigns and things. But yeah, Michael, I would love to hear from you. And I'm trying to send a chat to the entire webinar. I don't know if I can do that or not, but it would be great if I could do that.
Oh, you may. Oh, if you check everyone, or I might be able to do it for you, Hassan. But while we're figuring that out, one last question from Stefan. They're a resident of Ottawa, and they would like to see Ottawa go the same route as Montreal and New York in banning gas hookups in new buildings. Is there a campaign initiative in Ottawa advocating this? How can we go about working towards that? And they are chairing a climate change working group for a community association, and they might take on that idea. So Dan, I'll hand that over to you for answering that question.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't heard of any campaign or initiative on Ottawa advocating for this. But I would say, how can you go about this? I would say, let's say in my case where I'm renting an apartment, and I don't know own it. I don't think landlords have enough incentive or motivation to change that. since they don't live in there and they don't pay the mostly don't pay the bills, we end up paying the bills of heating bills and everything. So if they don't get that motivation of, oh, the bills are very high and everything, and we need to change this soon, I don't think they would ever change, you know. And that's how it's set up where I live. So I haven't seen any initiative or campaign calling for that. But if there are more taxes on these bills, and you know, then the landlords were given incentive and motivation to change, maybe they would.
I'll also flag related to this, and it might be of interest to the person who asked this. Is that in the city of Hamilton, our council, it was largely a symbolic gesture by our council, but they passed a motion supporting the decision by the Ontario Energy Board that was made back in December that the province has since pledged to overrule, which is essentially paying for new expansion of natural gas infrastructure in the province of Ontario. The OEB denied the move from Enbridge to expand, and essentially, you know, somewhere around like it's going to cost like natural gas customers like an extra $600 a year if it gets approved. And our council voted against it. But it's interesting because so much of the natural gas hookup issue right now is really politicized by our current provincial government. We have a provincial government that is, you know, going full tilt on natural gas or fossil gas. And so I think that's where a real struggle is going to be, is even if you have a municipality like the city of Hamilton, where we're willing to at least kind of go on record and pick a fight with Enbridge in some ways. In other ways, this is going to be a real uphill slog of a fight in any municipality for this, especially considering just how integrated Enbridge is in the energy system that we have in Ontario generally, and in Canada, Canada-wide. So I'm not seeing any other questions, and so I'm going to say a big thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. I'm happy to just share some additional things in the chat. I've shared House End's email in the chat, and I'm going to share Dan's as well. I'm also sharing mine. And then Derek, yours is Derek at Citizens Environmental Alliance, right? If I remember correctly, but I'll let you correct me on that before I share it in the chat and then give the wrong email. But generally speaking, just on behalf of the Urban Climate Alliance, I just want to say, if you're tuning in from other municipalities and you're perhaps part of another group, we would love to be in contact with you. We are just coming off an intense year of collaboration where we had a lot of learning from each other, but we're going to continue that collaboration going forward because we've really seen the value in working together. And so if you're part of another group and you want to be learning from this process, definitely get in contact with one or all of us. And at the end of the day, we really want to, you know, really highlight that there's so much opportunity for action in our various different municipalities, and there are so many different ways that we can learn. When one municipality is successful, that means it makes it so much easier for every other municipality to move forward on those things. And so at the end of the day, you know, keeping up these relationships, getting information out there to our own respective cities about what's happening elsewhere in the province is how we're going to be able to achieve real climate action in our different communities. So in the chat, I've shared everyone's emails, and I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us.